Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I'd like to talk a bit about using view models to create basically interesting or calculated interactions between different views inside of your Xamarin Forms application. So right here you can see that in my resource dictionary I've set up 12 copies of this view model I've created called stat view model. In some cases I have them defaulting one of the properties inside of that view model to 10, which is just relevant to the Pathfinder RPG, but don't worry about that too much if you don't know what that is. And with these view models, I have these views, the extended pickers and labels down here that I have bound to the different properties of those view models. And by using the view model, I can take the value out of my extended picker, run a formula calculation on it, and change the text in my labels, which basically, in this case, are calculating a bonus for the Pathfinder RPG. So, well, let's take a look at this first. So, for the selected index of the picker, whenever it changes, basically whenever someone clicks the drop down for the picker and selects something, it's going to trigger this where it has a binding with one of the view models, the one that corresponds with it. They're basically all the same, except they are for different views over here. So the strength stat view model, and then inside of that view model, it's going to look for the stat value property. And in this case, because this changed on the view, it's going to make that change on the property value as well. So if I set the stat to, let's say, 12, it's going to set the stat value inside of the view model to 12 as well. And then how I set my view model up is that when the set method is basically called on this view model for the stat value property, it's going to run a calculation, basically calculate a strength bonus, or well, the bonus for whichever stat, because it's the same for all the other stats as well. And then it's going to put that value inside of the stat bonus, and that stat bonus is going to be pulled out from the view model into this label. So I set a basically I set a stat here with the picker. It gets calculated inside of the view model, and it gets basically set to the property stat bonus, which then gets pulled out here to the label. So if it sounds a little complicated, don't worry, it took me a while to wrap my head around it as well. And of course, I'll be including all of my code here in the description for you to take a look at if that helps you out as well. Likewise, for the other view models and my other views, it's the same, just linking two different views together, but it's the same format, picker into label. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at this view model I created, the stat view model. It's a very, very simple, actually, probably one of the simplest examples of one. The main things you gotta look at here is that basically for these properties, stat value and stat bonus, especially stat value, I've made it change a little bit more. So it's not just a standard get and set. Instead, what happens here is that if the value does in fact change on the stat value, after calling on property changed, it's going to calculate the stat bonus and assign that to the stat bonus property. And part of that means that whenever stat bonus gets set, as it is being done here, that's also going to call on property changed. And whenever on property changed gets called, it updates the views back on the Xamarin Forms page. The calculation, it's just a simple formula here, minus 10, divide by 2, and reduce it to the next lowest integer. So if it's basically 9 minus 10 gives you negative 1, divide by 2 is 0.5, negative, of course, and that gets reduced down to the next lowest integer of negative 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the stats page. The main thing here is that basically by integrating with the views themselves and binding everything together, it reduces a lot of the C# code you would have to actually write. Let me show you kind of where I was going before I really read up on MVVM. That's the approach model views wait, hold on. MVVM, model view model. Right. Okay, anyway. So I was prepared to have ridiculous stuff like a list of all the views that I was going to have to manipulate, and then having all these crazy methods written in C# code, and imagine that there was going to be like 6 times more stuff. So having this view model, and basically just using bindings, reduces a lot of the code and really streamlines it. So it's quite helpful, and let me go ahead and run this app to show you kind of what's actually going on. And of course, once again, code's all going to be down in the description. Well, for the view model and this character stats page anyway. So I do have defaults set to these first 6 boxes. That is what is going on over here, where I have stat value set to a static resource, the static resource being right here. Aside from that, calculates the bonus automatically, and whenever I select one of the values from the drop-down menu, that's where all of the view model stuff gets called, and it ends up resulting in a calculated bonus that also updates in this label over here. Because it's the same code for all of them, basically, instead of trying to code stuff 6 or 12 times, just have the same formulas applying to all of them through the use of view models. So I found it to be pretty helpful and really cleaned up the code a lot. Of course, everything you see over here, I still have to delete it. This is pretty recent for my app. But I'll be including it in the description down below once I go ahead and clean it up. So anyway, I hope this kind of helped you out in figuring out the MVVM approach and binding basically data to your views inside of a Xamarin Forms application. So I've been Chris. Thank you for watching. If you want, you can check out my Patreon, and I will see you in my next video.